you're stuck at home in quarantine, 5 o'clock, why not have a drink with me?
Happy Friday, everybody! Good to see you. Here we are at the weekend. Before we get distracted, let's start with our Friday night tradition of starting with a shot, a 50-50 Amaro shot. And tonight we have the Newport. What is the Newport, you ask? Well, a lot of the 50-50 shots we have been having have been featuring the great Fernet Branca. This does not. This instead replaces this super intense herbal liqueur with its little sister, Branca Menta, which is even more menthol forward in its liqueur-ness and is super intense. And so we're gonna mix the menthol heavy Branca Menta 50-50 with some smoky mezcal for a shot that is called the Newport. Why is it called the Newport? Well, this was created by Souther Teague, who's a bartender at the Great Bitters Bar in New York City, Amor y Amargo. And it's called the Newport because it's supposed to be evocative of drinking a Newport cigarette. Haha! Smoky menthol Newport. Here we go. So I'm just gonna measure out equal parts into my awesome Boston Rocks glass. You can see the city map of Boston right there. Happy Friday from Peg, TGIF from Aaron, wave from Megan, and a hello from Emily. See, we have Keith in the chat also. Way to represent on a Friday night. So there is the Branca Menta. Nice smoky mezcal. Pretty sure this bottle of mezcal, it's Oaxacan, was brought here by friend of the show, Zach Abramson, last time he was up. I've slowly been making my way through it. And I think it's gonna go just fine in this 50-50 Amaro shot. Give it a little stir. And time to drink a Newport cigarette. Happy Friday, cheers. Ooh. It's fantastic. So good. These are all so good. All right, so today was a day. Did some work in the morning, was pretty productive, and then this afternoon ventured out to Wegmans again for our grocery run. We've been going every 10 or 11 days. I've sort of been alternating between Tuesdays and Fridays, and it was pretty much the same. I feel like we have like a steady state now about where we're at I got there, I first did a quick Target curbside pickup, which I'm very impressed with Target. They were very organized. You tell them when you're leaving your house in the app, you tell them when you get there. It took less than a minute, they came out, I held my thing up to the window, they scanned it, they put it in the trunk, bam, you're done. So that was super easy. Then I went over to Wegmans, which is right next door, and there was a line, as there always is. I waited probably about 30 minutes, which again is pretty typical of the last 4 times that I've been there. It's ranged from 25 to 45 minutes. Today was 30 or 35. And there you go. I haven't really experimented with the time of day that is most appropriate. Or to go, there must be ebbs and flows of traffic. I've pretty much always gone on a weekday in the middle of the day between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. So I don't know if earlier in the morning would be better or later in the afternoon, or if it's always just kind of like that. I assume the weekend would be busier. I haven't even attempted that, and I have no desire to, as long as I can work it around my work schedule. Yeah, so there we go. The one change I noticed, well, this was also my first time at Wegmans since they've, Massachusetts started mandatory mask wearing. And last time I went, everybody except I think I remember one guy had his bandana down around his neck. He wasn't wearing it on his face. Today everybody was wearing a mask. Compliance was high. So that was good. People in my neighborhood are actually very pro-mask walking around. And I almost feel when we've been walking the dogs around the neighborhood, haven't been putting a mask on just to take the dogs for a walk around the block, which I feel like is in line with the guidance that everybody has given that I've heard in terms of like wear a mask in places where you can expect to be close to people and can't maintain social distancing. And a walk around the block, I feel like doesn't really fit into that. But there are quite a few people who are just like out on walks or walking their dogs specifically wearing a mask. And there's one person by themselves wearing a mask walking the dog. And I don't begrudge them that, right? It doesn't do any harm. They're welcome to wear their masks however and whenever they want. But I don't want to be the guy that's like not wearing the mask when he's supposed to be wearing the mask. So I don't know, if you have any thoughts on that or if you're seeing anything similar in your neighborhoods, feel free to leave that in the chat. What else happened today? Oh, so this is an amazing thing. I got a text from my sister-in-law, Helen's sister Maggie, that her sister-in-law was like featured in a segment and appeared in a segment with Jimmy Fallon on his show last night. How cool is that? So this is my wife's sister's husband's brother's wife, which is, again, my sister-in-law's sister-in-law. But it's close enough. Anyway, her name is Kathy. She lives here in Massachusetts. She's a physician's assistant, and she's also pregnant. She's expecting a baby, her second child, in just a few weeks. And I guess Jimmy Fallon was doing this segment where they got 5 frontline workers who are also moms. And I guess the tie-in was Mother's Day coming up. And so they, under the ruse that they were like being interviewed for like a documentary, you see them sort of like, introducing themselves to this random woman, and then this woman is like, oh, like I want my like boss real quick wants to come and say something to you, and then it turns out it's Jimmy Fallon, and I was like, oh my god. So that's cool enough. Then this was all very clearly sponsored by Samsung. Then he goes, and here is like all this awesome Samsung gear. You're gonna get like 2 of the new crazy Samsung phones, 2 sets of like the awesome wireless earbuds, and like this whole pile of awesome Samsung gear, which is really cool. And they're all excited, and it's really cool. And then he goes, oh wait, before you go, like I forgot, there's one more thing. And he pulls out this piece of paper, which represents that he's giving them all $25,000. What? So that's really cool. That someone we know, we've been out to dinner with, we've like hung out with, was on Jimmy Fallon, met Jimmy Fallon via Zoom, got a bunch of free stuff, and then they also got $25,000, which I'm sure will help as they're expecting their second child in a few weeks. So that was really cool. Megan says we don't wear masks while out walking. Yeah, right? I mean, I feel like that's a reasonable standard. I feel like it's totally reasonable. I don't know. And speaking of people we know meeting celebrities, I am super excited about, so in the last couple of weeks, ever since quarantine has started and stay at home has started, I've been much more active on Twitter, mostly just, scrolling through my list, but I'll post now and again or reply to something. And Twitter's great because you can, I feel like, have an interaction with somebody who's like marginally famous. And anyway, over the last few weeks, culminating in yesterday, I have had tweets or replies liked by 3 of my idols, which has been really cool. So the first one was a few weeks ago when I was like replying to a comment on this 538 news story that was featured and talking about a Rutgers microbiologist, Dr. Don. I forget his last name, Don Schaefer? Keith might know if he's in the chat. But anyway, Dr. Don, and Dr. Don like replied to my comment, and he liked my comment, and I thought that was super cool. He not only is he this like random Rutgers microbiologist, but he's also the host of the great podcast Food Safety Talk, which if you're not already listening to, you should. But anyway, that was cool. Then last week I had replied to a post by David Wondrich, who is one of my favorite cocktail historians. He's written pretty much the seminal, he's the guy. He's written like the cocktail history books. The first he wrote was Imbibe, which is basically the history of cocktails from punches through pretty much to Prohibition. It gets into vermouth and then like a little bit of orgeat and other things. And this is like the seminal book. He used to be an author and wrote the cocktails column for Esquire. I think he still might dabble in that. But anyway, he's the guy. People are talking about cocktail history. They're talking about him. And he showed a handful of mint the day before Derby Day and was like, look what I got. And I'm like, me too, I got mint too, Derby Day. And anyway, he liked that, which was really cool. And then Schaffner, yeah, it might be Schaffner, right? Don Schaffner, Dr. Don. Aaron says, I bet those people wear masks in their car. I never understood that. Yes, I also see a lot of people driving around the neighborhood with their masks on in their car. There you go. I don't know. I think we're all still figuring it out. So I give a little bit of leeway, but I'm with you there. And you don't want to get Helen started on gloves. She's like, what? She doesn't understand why people are... For some people it makes sense, but for a lot of people they're wearing gloves, but they're not using them right, and they're still touching their face with their gloves, and it doesn't make any sense. But that's another story. Third of my idols that interacted with me on Twitter was yesterday. So yesterday morning, as has become my tradition, I wake up, I get a cup of coffee, put on MSNBC, and I do the New York Times crossword puzzle. And the Thursday, I don't know if any of you have done the New York Times crossword puzzle this week, but the Thursday crossword was just awful. It was just a terrible puzzle. I finished it. It wasn't the difficulty level. It was just dumb. The theme was dumb. The fill was awful. It was just a really bad puzzle. And so I tweeted out that today's New York Times crossword puzzle was the worst one that they've published in a while. And I used hashtag NYTXW, which is the New York Times crossword hashtag. And then that tweet was liked by the great Rex Parker. What? So, 3 of my idols all interacting with me on Twitter. Dr. Don, David Wondrich, Rex Parker. This is just making my quarantine, so it's quite nice. I'm going to finish this shot now. The Newport. So today, we're going to build on what we made yesterday. Yesterday we made the gin martini, and today we are making the other famous, iconic vermouth cocktail, the Manhattan. Now, if I were to compare the two, I will take the Manhattan over a martini every day. 10 times out of 10, twice on Sunday. What is that idiom? I don't know. Every day of the week and twice on Sunday? Anyway, I just think it's a much better cocktail. I generally prefer whiskey to gin. I generally like sweet vermouth better than dry vermouth. Even in the my homemade versions, I like the sweet vermouth better. But the history of the Manhattan is not too different than the history of the martini, except for the important note that the Manhattan predates the martini. The Manhattan is really the first original popular vermouth cocktail, and the martini follows the Manhattan by 5 to 10 years. We're talking 1870s to the 1880s. So the Manhattan in the mid-1870s, and then the martini becomes popular in the early 1880s. But they do have a lot in common. And in their histories, one of the things they have in common is that it generally makes sense how cocktails evolved into the Manhattan when we were making all these cocktails, and then vermouth becomes popular and we start messing with vermouth, right? Like that timeline makes sense. But the other thing that the Manhattan and the martini have in common is that we're not able to pinpoint this drink was invented by this person at this bar on this date, and that is just sort of lost to history. Probably one of the most legendary stories in cocktail history is of the creation of the Manhattan. And the story goes that a woman by the name of, what was her name? It's like Jenny Jones or Jenny, I don't know. She was, or Jenny Jerome, I believe. She was Winston Churchill's mother. And the story goes that she was throwing a party for when Tilden was elected governor of New York in the 1870s. I think it was 1876. And she was throwing this party at the Manhattan Club in Manhattan, obviously, for Sam Tilden. And at this party, she wanted them to create this cocktail, and they created this cocktail, which they called the Manhattan, after the name of the place, the Manhattan Club. And anyway, that's the story that for decades, for probably over a century, people were telling. But it doesn't hold up under strict scrutiny at all, unfortunately. So it wasn't created at this party. However, there is some evidence that it was created I would say there's a higher than 50% chance that it was created at the Manhattan Club, right? So first of all, everybody agrees it was created in Manhattan, so we have that. We can narrow it down to New York City. But most people would say, and most of the evidence leans towards the fact that it was created at the Manhattan Club, even if it wasn't at this particular party thrown by Winston Churchill's mother for newly elected Governor Tilden. So we'll see about that. But anyway, more generally, it's like, we're mixing stuff. We love our whiskey drinks. We're going to mix some sweet vermouth, and bam, you have the Manhattan. Early recipes would have some sweetener. It would definitely have the bitters in there, but it would also have some sweetener from Curacao or maybe maraschino liqueur. Both are possible, and in fact, if you go to a New York City bar, employees only, they'll make their Manhattan with half an ounce of Curacao, which is a nice callback to the early recipes for the Manhattan. But basically what we have is we have bitters, we have a ratio of whiskey, probably rye, I'm definitely using rye, and sweet vermouth, and then we mix it up nicely and we serve it up, and it's a delicious, delicious cocktail, and we're going to make one right now. So let's get to it. So as with any drink, as we talked about yesterday with the martini, the first real decision that you need to make is, what is your ratio going to be? So I am going to be doing a 2-to-1 ratio of rye to sweet vermouth. That I feel like is the sort of maximum amount of sweet vermouth that you'll find in most recipes. From there, it would step down to maybe a 3-to-1 versus 2-to-1 of rye to sweet vermouth. And you can go from there. But I feel like that's really the decision you want to make. Because am I going to use 2 ounces of rye, 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, or am I going to use 2 1/4 ounces of rye and 3/4 of an ounce of sweet vermouth? I love my sweet vermouth. I want to be using this. It's my homemade house Ryan Kelly brand sweet vermouth. So I don't want to hide it. I don't want to run away from it. We're going to use it. So let's do it. We're also going to be using Beard Bitters. This show brought to you by Beard Bitters, Ryan Kelly's aromatic bitters, brought to you by Beard Bitters. So let's do a couple of dashes of Beard Bitters in there. Delicious. We're going to do 2 ounces of our Rittenhouse rye. This is our high-proof, 100-proof, bottled in bond Rittenhouse rye. It is spicy. It will kick you in the pants a little bit, but it is so, so good. This is my house rye. This is what I make my old fashions with, and what I make my Manhattans with, clearly. And then last but not least, we have our sweet vermouth. And like I said, I'm doing 2-to-1, so I'm going to be using 2 ounces of rye and 1 ounce of sweet vermouth. Now remember, as we talked about yesterday, when the early recipes for the martini were also using sweet vermouth. So it's basically taking the Manhattan, which was a really popular drink, and saying hey, what if instead of this whiskey you're using, we sub in some gin? And there you have the first recipes for the martini, which you would never do today. You would never get sweet vermouth in a martini today. But that's how it goes. And then eventually it turned into the dry gin martini, not because it was dry and that it didn't have vermouth, but because it was dry because it was using dry vermouth, French vermouth, as opposed to the sweet vermouth, or Italian vermouth, as they call it. Looks like we've got SV Untangled. Hello, Philippe and or Carolyn. Sounds like this Ryan Kelly guy has a fantastic lineup of drink ingredients. Indeed. For all of your house bitter needs, just come right here. Beard Bitters. I'm also gonna, so my next plan is to dabble in dabble in making some Amaro. That's the next phase that I'm going to go to, and I'm still sort of feeling out what the right gateway is into the Amaro world, but I'm really excited about that. So we have our bitters, we have our rye, we have our sweet vermouth. Next, we need our final ingredient, which you won't see listed on the ingredient list, but is an ingredient in all of our cocktails, which is water, aka frozen water, aka ice. So let me just grab my ice from the freezer right here. And gently put them into our stirring glass. And clearly this is a drink that is going to be stirred because we want to preserve the beautiful clarity of the drink. We're still going to get it nice and cold, and we have nothing that we need to emulsify. We don't have any egg white, we don't have any citrus. So let's get to it. Breaking news, I just got word that friend of the show, Zach Abramson's personal valet has tested positive for coronavirus. He seems to be recovering, and our fingers are crossed that this valet did not infect friend of the show, Zach Abramson, with the virus. The other thing happened today is when I was at Wegmans, I, at any grocery store you go to, the Olive Bar is closed, obviously, right? They don't want people touching all sorts of stuff and scooping and serving themselves. The bulk section is also totally closed, and the Olive Bar is closed. But they did have a nice little refrigerator section near where the Olive Bar was going to be, and they had some prepackaged things of olives. And so I'm excited that I got some. I like the black oil cured olives, and so I got a little container of these. They're Moroccan oil cured olives, and I prefer them when they have pits in them, but I would have bought them whether they have pits or no pits. It's going to be delicious either way. And so the label on the container said, oil cured olives -pitted, origin, Morocco. And I made the assumption, tell me if this is dumb, I made the assumption that pitted meant that the pits were removed. But then I bit into one and bam, there's a pit. And then I got to think, well, pitted, does pitted mean that it has a pit in it? Or does pitted mean that the pit was removed? I don't know. And then suddenly everything was just going crazy in my head. Well, what does pitted really mean? So feel free to make a note in the chat whether you would have interpreted pitted as it still has the pits, or the pits were removed from the olives that you're buying. I have no idea. I have this chilled coupe glass that I've had some ice in since we've started. Dump that out. I'm going to take my julep strainer and strain into my nice cold coupe glass. Emily said pitted should mean the pit was removed. Right? That's what I thought. Aaron says I made that mistake with dates. Pitted means they have pits in them. Interested. Pitted dates have pits in them. SV Untangled. That's what I would have guessed. Aaron said I think. Megan, I think thoughts it means pit out. Huh. Well, my great sister Erin at least had a similar experience and was confused by the terminology. Pitted, pit in, pit out. I don't know. So we're gonna garnish this with the world famous and wonderful Luxardo Maraschino cherries. And the Jim Meehan recipe that I'm using, this is the 2-to-1 recipe, which I like, calls for 3 of these cherries, which is quite a lot. These are quite rich. But I think it'll work nicely with my coupe glass here. So I'm going to try to skewer 3 cherries onto my nice cocktail skewer. Now, I don't mind if a little bit of the delicious, delicious cherry juice gets in the drink, but I don't want too much of it in there, right? I don't want to like totally change the complexion of the drink because there's all of these just super sweet syrup now falling into my drink. So I'm just gonna kind of let them drip off, and I'm gonna just throw that right over there like that, and there we have the Manhattan. And let's take a sip. Orange peel, a nice long strip of orange zest would be a great garnish for this drink also. But I'm in a cherry sort of mood tonight. Yeah. Whew. So good. I like the 2-to-1. I can really taste, I'm just very like in tune with my house sweet vermouth, obviously. And I want those flavors and those spices and those herbs to come through, and it does in the 2-to-1 in a way where I feel like it's going to be more subtle and more hidden in the 3-to-1 ratio. So I like that I went 2-to-1. You still get the spiciness of the rye, you still get the kick, but this isn't gonna. You also have the advantage of it's not gonna like totally land you on your ass, because it has a 1/4 of an ounce less of rye, I guess. Which, as I explained a little bit yesterday, was sort of where they were going. The original vermouth cocktail was called the vermouth cocktail, and it was basically just a glass of vermouth with like a little bit of spirit in it, and it was like drinking wine, and so you don't get the like kick of a cocktail. And then on the other end of the spectrum, they were making these super boozy drinks and put in a little bit of vermouth. And there too, there's no balance to it. And then when they have the Manhattan, they're like, oh, this is the balance between the spirit and the vermouth that we're looking for. Not too strong, not too weak, right in the middle, flavors working with each other. It's beautiful. Helen says, Cook's Illustrated said, pitted is pits removed. All right, that's what I thought. Also, pitted olives are worse than those with pits. Does Cook's Illustrated say that, or is that now your personal opinion, Helen? This is important. SBM Tangled said, it's one or other, never both. That would be a devilish thing to do, to say pitted, and then you don't know what you're going to get. It sounds like a choking hazard to me. Helen says, per Cook's Illustrated, I personally think all olives are bad. Got it. All right, well, there you have it. These pitted olives seem to have been mislabeled. And I'm glad that I didn't damage a tooth or choke on the pit. And maybe I'll be writing a letter to Wegmans of moderate intensity, explaining how this was slightly confusing to me. SB Untangled, garnish-wise for our comment. Oh, I see. So, can you do the orange and the cherry? Yes. I think if I were to do that, we were trying to keep it classy. This isn't a tiki drink where the name of the game is like, let's just go crazy with our garnish. And so I think if I were to do both, I would just use 1 cherry, not 3. And sometimes I like to do a little, like you take the nice, you take the orange peel and then you curl it around a cherry and put the cocktail pick through, and that can be a really nice presentation. And then you get that orange, scent and aroma on the nose, which is really nice. I like how this is turning Ryan into Andy Rooney. And I'll tell you what, if my barbershop doesn't open anytime soon, I'm going to have the eyebrows of Andy Rooney too. I used to like Andy Rooney. I feel like my dad was always watching 60 Minutes, and I'd come in for the last few minutes and, enjoy the cranky old man who's yelling at the sky. All right, my friends. So I hope you had a good day today, and I hope you are finding your way to ease into the wonderful weekend and are ready. It's supposed to get real cold here in Boston. Gonna dip down into the 30s overnight tonight. The highs tomorrow and Sunday are in the mid to low 40s. So we are making sure that heat is coming back on, not getting any respite, I guess, in New England this weekend, weather-wise. And hopefully, I think we're close enough to the coast both to avoid snow, which some places inland might see tonight, but I think we will also avoid a frost tonight, which will be good for Helen's particularly worried about her peonies, which are growing out back. Helen says, I demand payment for haircut and cocktails. That's never a problem. Nat Trask, sunglasses. Is that an ice cube? What is that second emoji there? Is that a cold weather guy? Are you teasing us, Nat? Are you mocking us from your sunny Albuquerque environs? I think maybe you are.
It's 5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
Cheers, everyone.